Hey guys, welcome to Mad Scientist BBQ. I'm Erica Yoder, and today I am super excited because I'm cooking something that I've never seen before except at one place in Texas. Today we are cooking bacon ribs. The first thing we have to do to prepare these bacon ribs is cure them. That's what gives it the bacon-like flavor. That's why ham might taste different than something that's uncured. It's the curing process. So that involves using curing salt, in this case, Prague powder number 1 or Instacure number 1 or curing salt number 1, whatever you want to call it. It has sodium nitrite in it. And then we're going to add table salt and a little brown sugar. It's a very simple cure because I'm going to add more flavor with the spices that we add when we rub these before we smoke them. The reason I'm doing a wet brine rather than a dry brine like most bacon recipes call for is twofold. The first is wet brines are faster. Typical protocols call for 4 to 5 days of curing rather than 7 to 10 days with a dry cure. The second reason is I'm going to cut one of these slabs into individual ribs, and I want to make sure that I don't over-cure the individual ribs and under-cure the whole slab. So being in wet brine, it should reach equilibrium and it won't continue to increase the concentration of salt in the meat just by having a layer of salt on the outside. So they're going to be equally cured and everything should be cured evenly. So those are the reasons why I'm doing the wet brine. Very simple. It's a gallon of water. It's 8 ounces of kosher salt. It's 5 ounces of brown sugar, and it's half an ounce of pink curing salt number 1. So I have some hot water that I'm going to use to mix all those ingredients and get them dissolved. And then I have some ice water that I'm going to add to it so that we have everything cool before we put the meat in. All right, let's dissolve some of these dry ingredients. The salt's almost completely dissolved already. Brown sugar. More brown sugar. This is where you could separate it and get the rib portion there that's connected to this, the belly, but why not just cook them both together? Because you can. In order to get this to really penetrate well on this whole slab, I'm going to remove the membrane on the back of this, something I never do, but I think for this, it's warranted. Get your handy dandy paper towel. I haven't done that in so long. Look at how red the meat on that pork is. This is what the big difference is between commodity pork and stuff that you get from a place like Porter Road. It's actually dark red. Whereas pork you buy in the store, it's the other white meat. But really, this is going to be so much more flavorful. There's a lot more myoglobin in there. And you're going to have a much richer and more delectable cut of meat at the end. So let's cure this up. I can't wait to put this on the smoker. Okay, lid on, this goes in the fridge. I'll see you guys in about 5 days. Our bacon ribs have been in the fridge in this wet brine for, I think this is the 7th day now. So hopefully it's had plenty of time to penetrate. I know the individual ribs I cut up shouldn't be a problem, but the whole slab, I'm a little bit nervous about it. We're gonna find out how far the cure penetrated based on color when we're done. But before I get those out and pat them dry, I'm gonna construct a spice rub that we're gonna put on the outside. We don't wanna use a pre-made rub because almost all of them already have salt. So the spice rub that we're gonna create isn't gonna have any salt, but it's gonna have other flavors that we want on this super rich and decadent cut of meat. Got a shaker right here. I have a ton of these things, and Despite the fact that I cook almost everything with just salt and pepper, I have lots of different spices and I play around with stuff all the time. So I recommend getting these, and constructing your own rubs is a lot of fun and gives you some ownership over the process. But first ingredient is 16 mesh black pepper. Not a shock. And we're definitely going to be including more of this than anything else. Also, I'm going to include all these ingredients in a link in the description. So, this ingredient, granulated garlic. It's not garlic powder because that can kind of clump up really easily. Next, we have ancho chili powder, an ingredient that I love, and my wife, we'll just say she does not love it. It gives kind of a nice raisiny flavor, but not very much heat. Next up, we have a little bit of guajillo chili. This is a little bit for color, just like the ancho, and then it's got a little bit of spice and a little bit of flavor. Then we have a little bit of chipotle. It's got about the same heat as cayenne, but I think much better flavor. A little bit of dry mustard powder. Next up, we have an ingredient that I really like. It's maple sugar, like maple syrup, but a sugar. Brown sugar is good, but I like maple sugar even more, and maple syrup is difficult to include in a rub. The next ingredient we have is one of my very, very favorites. I highly, highly, highly recommend that you guys check this out. This is granulated honey. So it's like the flavor of honey, but in granules. This is pork. It's already cured. It needs some sweetness to balance it out, so we have 2 forms of sugar. Let's shake this up. So here we have our rub. It's got a little bit of red from the chilies that we added, but we're not going to really have to work too hard to create color because we're going to be creating color with the smoke in the smoker. So this is going to help things out a little bit, and it's going to provide some sweetness to offset some of that richness that we get from the cured meat. Let's get our bacon ribs. Let's see what they look like. I haven't peeked at these. Individual bones. This is humongous. Oh man, doesn't that one look good? Ah, there's even marbling in the meat streaks in the bacon. This is going to be amazing. Now the whole ride. On the very top here, I'm going to go pretty heavy. So we're putting those on at about 200 degrees, and today we're using hickory wood because I want to make sure I get plenty of smoke flavor in there. Unlike regular bacon where you're cold smoking and then you cook it later, we have to get plenty of smoke flavor in there in the short period of time before these heat up. All right, it's been about 6 hours. I think the individual ribs are going to be almost done because they're going to be a lot thinner than the whole huge rack all together, because it's going to be the thickness of the meat that's going to determine how quickly it cooks. Also, in other news, I finally have a cooktop for this table. So once again, shout out to Brad for the chud table. I freaking love it. So if you're wondering what we were doing, we spent about the first 4 hours kind of low and smoky at about 200 degrees. And the last couple hours we've been doing between 250 degrees and 275 degrees. And we want to render fat at this point. The beginning was to get it smoky and get good color. Now we're focused on rendering fat because there's so much fat, it's got to be rendered well for this to be really tasty in the end. So I checked the temperature of the ribs using my handy dandy thermopen. The whole slab is about 168 degrees, and then the individual ribs are in the 190. So that means I got to work on my glaze right now. It's going to be a maple bourbon glaze. Let me show you how I do it. First, we're going with the maple syrup. This stuff is so delicious. And this being Kentucky, we're going to make a maple bourbon glaze. This is just some Evan Williams. It's not going to be super fancy stuff. If I used super fancy stuff, my brother would drive over here from his house and punch me in the face because that is a waste of good bourbon. He is a bourbon connoisseur. I am not, but I know enough not to use like Pappy Van Winkle or something in this. But What we're after in creating this glaze is we want to balance out all the richness and fattiness of the pork belly. So we have the maple syrup because it's going to provide sweetness as kind of a counter to the really fatty, rich stuff. And then we have the bourbon that's got a kind of sweetness all its own, but it's going to have the alcohol that's going to help cut through some of the fattiness, and a lot of the alcohol is going to cook off, probably almost all of it. And then we're going to need something else to balance the fattiness. And you can do this with acids or things that are a little sour. And for that, we have tamarind paste. If you guys don't know about this ingredient, it's an awesome ingredient. It tastes kind of sour and tart. It's kind of citrusy. And this is an ingredient that people use in barbecue sauces a lot. It's absolutely delicious when you use it in small quantities. So we're going to add a little bit of this now. Not too much. We'll just scoop that in there. Cleaned with alcohol. And then lastly, I'm going to add a little bit of honey because it's going to thicken this up, hopefully to about the right consistency. And it provides another kind of sweetness because the sugars present in maple syrup are not going to be identical to the sugars present in honey. This is actually from Knottywood. With the last pellets they sent me, they actually sent some honey, which I'm excited about. I have not tried it. It's almond blossom honey. Oh, it smells good.
I can smell it all the way from here.
You can smell the honey all over it? Yeah, that's freaking good. When I was a kid, we used to put honey on toast. And my mom would make homemade bread, and then she'd make toast. She would actually like kind of fry it in butter, and then we'd put honey on it. Oh, that's what it reminds me of. Just a little bit. Mix it all together. The total ratio of bourbon is probably a quarter of the volume, and then everything else makes up the remaining 3/4. What I want here is something sweet, a little bit tangy, and then just a little hint of the bourbon flavor. It's not going to be as complex as a sauce because we already added rub on the outside. I just want it to be tasty. That's good. Look at this. We're going to let these individual ribs glaze. The full rack needs more time, so we're going to wait a little bit to glaze that. I think some of the individual ribs are done, so we're going to pull those off, and I got this aluminum tray that I'm going to put them in. Okay, both versions are done, so we're gonna taste them. I have my buddy Kyle over here. He's gonna be a taste tester. Ideally, these would rest a little bit longer, but the show must go on, and he can't wait around all night. So they are done, but we're gonna slice into them, even though they're still pretty hot. Okay, so we have our two samples. One is very barky, the individual ribs, and then one is super juicy, this whole slab that we cut up now. And if we look at this big, thick chunk of meat, we have kind of a bullseye right in the center. I mean, obviously extremely juicy. But we have this bullseye right in the center where the cure did not penetrate all the way through. We got almost all the way through, so I'd probably recommend going 8 days, 9 days, 10 days on this just to make sure that everything gets cured. But with the individual ribs, all the cure is definitely going to have gone all the way through. But I'm really looking forward to this because this is really great quality pork. It's from Porter Road, and I want to thank Porter Road for sponsoring today's video. If you guys don't know about Porter Road, They have tremendous quality meats, both beef and pork. Their beef, they dry age hanging on the carcass, and so you don't have the typical waste that you have with normal dry aged meat. Also, it doesn't have the super pungent dry aged flavor. It's actually really nice, kind of nutty flavor, and it helps to tenderize the meat. With the pork, rather than just processing the animal really well and ethically raising the animal, they have something that you don't find in commodity pork. When we took these out of the package, you saw that all the meat was a deep, dark red. And that's because they're not using commodity breeds. Instead, what they have is kind of a cross between two heritage breeds, and that means more myoglobin, more flavor, and ultimately a better product from whatever you put on the smoker. And in addition, I don't think there's anywhere else that's selling bacon ribs. So if you guys are interested in the bacon ribs or the tremendous quality beef that they have that I've used in a bunch of videos in the past, just click on the link in the description. You can get 15% off, and you'll get a list of my favorite items from Porter Road. And these bacon ribs, I have a feeling, are going to be at the top of that list. I got inspired to do these when I was in Texas because at Leroy and Lewis, they make really good food. But the best bite of barbecue that I had while I was in Texas was the bacon rib from Leroy and Lewis. It was so good. I made a face in the video. It looked something like this. And yes, the bacon rib was that good. And if I can make this half as good as that was, I'm going to be really happy. So let me get into tasting these, and we're going to see which method is the best. The individual ribs definitely cook faster. They're definitely barkier, but let's see if they're still juicy. Okay, so I have my buddy Kyle here. If you guys are on the Discord with Patreon, it's Kyle Cowboy Q. He doesn't live very far away, and we actually do some of the classes that we put on in Kentucky at his farm. So that's how we know each other, and I was like, I know somebody who loves barbecue and would probably be willing to come over. I'm guessing it's good because my wife Erica stole one of these bacon ribs and is currently eating it. She's not actually manning the camera at all, so hopefully that's a good sign. But Kyle, so we have our individual ribs. It should be kind of barkier on the outside and hopefully still juicy. Okay. Then we have the one that we cooked as a whole rack, which just looks pretty awesome in this like huge, thick rack of pork ribs. But I say we start with one of these that was from the whole rack. Okay. And then we move on to the individual. So on the whole rack, we're still able to get really nice, dark, deep colored bark, and it's still packed with juice. The only rule is you got to be honest. If you don't like it, you can say, I don't like it. Oh, by the way, so Kyle loves barbecue, but he's not a salt and pepper guy like me. So I'm like, salt and pepper, 99.9% of the time.
You're slowly changing my opinion.
Well,
Caveat.
To be fair, though, Kyle's more of like a meat church seasoning guy. He wants a more complex rub in what he's doing. Let's get into one of these from the whole rack. I'm going to take a bite from the end here and see what it's like. Smells good. That's not bad. Juicy. I like that you can taste like a bacon cure on that.
Mm-hmm. Definitely not mad about it.
There's sweetness on the outside, but I don't think it's too sweet. For me, I don't like too sweet, but I could have gone even maybe a little bit sweeter.
They're not fall off the bone. They're cooked to perfection.
Well, thank you, Kyle. That's juicy.
Mm-hmm.
Could have gone maybe even a little bit longer and just rendered it down even more. I'm going to eat some of what would actually be the rib part at the bottom. Different texture.
Let's try the individual ones.
After you, sir. All right. Cheers, Kyle.
Cheers, buddy.
100% this is the way to go.
Yep.
Sorry. I shouldn't have said that. What do you think, Kyle?
Definitely, if I were doing this, definitely individual them. Definitely cook them cut up already.
It's still super juicy with all that fat in there. And you have so much opportunity to create more flavor on the outside. And another thing is, these are so darn rich that you're going to be eating like one, or if you're a glutton like me, two. Man, that's good.
Oh my God.
Dude. Get a little crispness.
Wow.
You get kind of that bacon saltiness. You taste the curing salt in there too. Wow.
Erica, get you that one. Have another one.
All right, Kyle. What do you think? My thoughts, I will save, but give us yours. The good, the bad, the ugly, whatever you think.
First time I've ever had this, and I will definitely be going online and trying Porter Road out.
I have an extra rack in the freezer if you want it. You want to take that home?
I would greatly appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, so what are your thoughts between the two? Let's start this. What do you think of the glaze? You like the glaze?
Love the glaze.
Okay.
Love the glaze. The perfect hint of maple, perfect hint of that Tennessee bourbon. It's phenomenal.
So, if you're taking that rack of ribs home, how are you doing it? You cutting it into individual bones, or are you going to do the whole rack?
I personally am going to cut them individually.
The individual bones, there's more flavor there. It was a little saltier, so I would probably maybe put it in the brine for 5 days instead of 7, maybe 4 days instead of 7, because the issue wasn't with the cure penetrating. It's just We don't want it to be too salty. You can reduce the total amount of the kosher salt that we used if you want it to be less salty. But I think what I would probably do is take it to 180, wrap them just to soften the outside just a little bit.
Foil or paper?
Foil.
Foil.
And then I would glaze them with a glaze and then just kind of let it sit in there, let it rest, then take a bite. Because even though there's sweetness there, I want just the outside to be a little bit softer and maybe just a hair less salt. With these, I think the salt amount was perfect.
I agree.
These were juicier. The whole outside was softer because we kind of cooked it as like one whole big chunk rather than having a ton of surface area. So if you want softer and you want something that you can slice on the board and you just throw one of those on a plate and it looks like you have this rib, but on top is this big fat chunk of bacon, I think maybe this. Both are good. If you want more texture and more smoke, go individual. If you want juicier and something that just looks super cool when you cut it and, you know, divvy out the individual bones, I'd go the whole rack. Either way, I don't think you can go wrong. Erica actually prefers the ones that were the whole rack. But yeah, this was super cool. I'm definitely going to be doing these again. I got to dial it in.
I am definitely going to try these.
Well, thanks, Kyle. Thanks for being a guinea pig for us.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, man. Want a paper towel?
Yeah, probably.
So, final thoughts. This is one of the coolest cuts I think you can find anywhere. I don't know of anywhere else you can find it except for at Porter Road. The flavor of the pork is really good. The flavor of the cure enhances it. The flavor of the smoke enhances it even further. And then kind of the flavors that we put on the outside with the rub and the sweetness is just, it's really my cup of tea. So if you want what's kind of like the juiciest rib of all time, or if you want kind of the richest tasting pork belly of all time, this is kind of the way to go. So the bacon rib reigns supreme in my book right now as far as pork goes. It's something I'm definitely going to be doing again and again and again. And I know that every time I serve it for people, they're going to be like, where did you get this? And I'm like, actually, you know what? You can't find it in the store. This is something special that I got. So I'm really looking forward to that. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit the like button down below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more fun and informative barbecue content. You can also follow me on Patreon. That's where Kyle is, and you can get on the Discord and you can chat with other people who love barbecue. You can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Mad Scientist BBQ. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll see you next time.
See, what they do is they separate the pork ribs from the belly. It's just a psychological operation. I have from top levels of the government. The CIA is doing this to keep pork bellies from the people.